A man dies in Vienna. No funeral, no obituary, no record of his birth, his education, or his 31 years of work designing weapons that could kill millions. Austrian police find the body in a rented apartment near the Danube. Heart attack, the coroner writes. Natural causes. Case closed within 72 hours. But 3 intelligence agencies know the truth. The man on that apartment floor had no name in any government database, no passport in any archive, no photograph in any file. He was a ghost who built nightmares for dictators. And Mossad had just made him disappear for the second time. The first time, Iran erased his identity. The second time, Israel erased his life. This is the story of Dr. Fareed Nazari, a man who never officially existed, and the operation that hunted him across 4 countries to ensure he never would. In the winter of 1987, a 19-year-old chemistry student vanished from Tehran University. His professors reported him missing. His family filed papers with local police. Searches were conducted. Announcements were made. After 6 weeks, Fareed Nazari was declared dead, likely a victim of the chaos still consuming Iran 8 years after the revolution. His mother held a funeral. His father buried an empty coffin. His younger sister placed flowers on a grave that contained nothing but stones and soil. But Fareed Nazari was not dead. He was sitting in a windowless laboratory 40 kilometers outside Tehran, beginning the first day of a career that would make him one of the most valuable and most invisible scientists in the Middle East. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps had identified him during his second year at university. His professors described him as unnervingly gifted, a student who understood molecular structures the way musicians understand melody. He could visualize chemical reactions before they happened, predict outcomes that took others weeks of experimentation. When IRGC recruiters approached him, they did not offer a choice. They offered a new life. His old identity would be erased. His family would believe him dead. In exchange, he would receive unlimited resources, complete protection, and the opportunity to serve a cause greater than himself. Fareed accepted. Whether out of patriotism, ambition, or simply the recognition that refusal was not truly an option, he walked into that laboratory and never walked out as the same person. The young man who loved poetry and played chess with his father ceased to exist. In his place emerged someone the IRGC called only Saya, the Shadow. What distinguished Fareed from other scientists conscripted into Iran's weapons programs was not just intelligence, but imagination. He did not simply follow formulas, he invented them. Within 3 years, he had redesigned the binary chemical mixing system that made Iran's nerve agent production more stable and more lethal. By 1995, he had developed a new dispersal mechanism for biological agents that could survive atmospheric release at altitudes previous designs could not achieve. His work was never published. His name appeared on no patents, but his fingerprints were on weapon systems that kept Israeli intelligence analysts awake at night. The problem with ghosts is that they leave traces despite their invisibility. A chemical signature here, an engineering innovation there. Intelligence services began noticing patterns in weapons captured from Hezbollah stockpiles and later from Syrian government facilities. The designs showed a consistency that suggested a single mind. Someone was creating a unified architecture for weapons of mass destruction across multiple state programs. Someone brilliant, someone invisible, someone who needed to be found. But here is where the story takes its first dark turn. Mossad was not the only agency hunting the ghost, and the competition to find him would create alliances and betrayals that no one anticipated. Fareed's methodology was distinctive. He never worked on complete systems. Instead, he designed components that could be assembled by others, ensuring that no single facility possessed the full blueprint. This compartmentalization was both security measure and insurance policy. If he ever became a liability, his knowledge alone could not recreate what he had built. The system required him alive, or so he believed. Mossad's Technology and Science Division first flagged the pattern in 2003. An analyst named only as David in declassified references noticed that chemical weapon components recovered from a Hezbollah cache in southern Lebanon shared molecular signatures with samples obtained from an Iraqi facility before the American invasion. The probability of coincidence was negligible. Someone was supplying technical knowledge across enemy lines, creating a network of shared capability that threatened Israel from multiple directions simultaneously. David assembled a team. For 3 years, they worked backward from weapons to workshops, from workshops to supply chains, from supply chains to the scientists who designed them. Every lead ended in walls. The manufacturers knew only code names. The suppliers received instructions through dead drops. The scientists listed on official programs were competent, but clearly not the originators of the most sophisticated designs. Somewhere in the shadows sat a ghost, and ghosts, by definition, cannot be found through conventional means. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. In 2007, a Syrian general defected to Jordan, bringing with him files he had stolen from a facility near Damascus. Most of the documents concerned conventional weapons and troop deployments, but buried in the data was a single reference to a consultation visit from an Iranian specialist identified only as the professor from nowhere. The Syrian general recalled meeting this man once. He described him as quiet, forgettable, with the kind of face that slipped from memory moments after looking away. But he remembered one detail. The man had a distinctive habit of tapping his left thumb against his index finger when thinking, a rhythmic pattern like a heartbeat. It was almost nothing. But almost nothing is more than Mossad usually receives when hunting ghosts. Here is what official sources will never confirm. Mossad did not hunt the ghost alone. The CIA had also identified the pattern, reaching similar conclusions through different evidence. A rare agreement was reached. Resources would be shared. Intelligence would be pooled. The Americans would provide satellite coverage and signals intelligence. The Israelis would provide human assets on the ground. Neither would inform the other of operational details. Both would benefit from the elimination of a threat that endangered their separate interests equally. What neither agency anticipated was that their ghost had protectors who were equally determined to keep him invisible. The IRGC had assigned a dedicated counterintelligence unit to monitor any attempts to locate their prized scientist. They watched the watchers. They fed false information through channels they knew were compromised. They created phantom versions of Farid in different cities, decoys designed to waste the resources of anyone hunting him. For years, this strategy worked. Mossad chased shadows of shadows, always arriving too late, always finding empty apartments and abandoned safe houses. The ghost remained untouchable. By 2009, Dr. Farid Nazari had become irreplaceable. His work had expanded beyond chemical and biological weapons into nuclear enrichment technologies. He had consulted for programs in Syria, Sudan, and through carefully obscured channels, North Korea. His knowledge represented not just Iranian capabilities, but a network of proliferation that connected hostile states across continents. Eliminating him would not simply remove one scientist, it would sever connections that had taken decades to build. Iran understood his value. After the assassination of several nuclear scientists between 2010 and 2012, the IRGC implemented new security protocols for their most valuable assets. Farid was moved constantly. He never slept in the same location for more than 4 nights. He traveled under identities that changed monthly. His communications passed through encryption systems that even NSA analysts described as exceptionally sophisticated. He had become a shadow inside a shadow, protected by layers of security that made direct approach nearly impossible. But shadows must sometimes step into light. And in the spring of 2014, Israeli intelligence received information that would change everything. A source inside Iranian logistics reported that the professor from nowhere had developed a medical condition requiring specialized treatment unavailable in Iran. The condition was cardiac. The required procedure was a catheter ablation for atrial fibrillation. Iran's medical facilities could not perform it safely. After months of internal debate, the IRGC authorized foreign travel. Farid would fly to Vienna, receive treatment at a private clinic under an assumed identity, and return within 2 weeks. The window was narrow. The opportunity was unprecedented. What happened next remains one of the most closely guarded operational secrets in Mossad history. But fragments have emerged through defector testimony, leaked communications, and the painstaking reconstruction of investigators who pieced together evidence from multiple sources. This is what they found. Now pay attention, because what you are about to read has never been fully assembled in a single narrative before. The planning began 7 weeks before Farid's scheduled arrival in Vienna. Mossad's Operations Directorate assembled a team of 16 operatives drawn from multiple units. Qaidon provided the specialists trained in targeted elimination. Neviot contributed surveillance experts. Caesarea supplied the field operatives who would execute the mission. Each team member received fragments of the overall plan. None knew the complete picture except the mission commander, identified in leaked documents only as Ezra. The challenges were immense. Farid would travel with 3 IRGC bodyguards. His clinic appointments would be secured in advance. His accommodation would be swept for surveillance devices daily. His movements would be unpredictable, determined by his protection detail rather than his own preferences. Traditional approaches, car bombs, shooting, poison in food, carried unacceptable risks of failure or exposure. Ezra's solution was elegant in its audacity. They would not attack Farid. They would become part of his medical treatment. 3 months before the operation, a Mossad asset in Vienna began cultivating a relationship with administrative staff at the private cardiac clinic where Farid would be treated. Through careful social engineering, gifts, dinners, the slow building of trust, the asset gained access to scheduling systems. When Farid's appointment was booked under his cover identity, the asset ensured that a specific anesthesiologist would be assigned to his procedure. Dr. Martin Schell was not a Mossad operative. He was a skilled Austrian physician with gambling debts, a failing marriage, and a vulnerability that Israeli intelligence had identified years earlier for exactly this kind of situation. He was not asked to kill anyone. He was simply asked to administer a slightly modified anesthetic protocol, one that would leave Farid more susceptible to cardiac complications in the weeks following his procedure. The fee for this service was 400,000 euros, and the disappearance of evidence that would have ended his career and his freedom. Dr. Schell agreed. What choice did he have? But the operation had a second layer. The modified anesthetic would weaken Farid's heart, but it would not guarantee death. For that, a more direct intervention was required. This is where the story becomes truly disturbing. And this is the part that investigators believe but cannot prove. Farid arrived in Vienna on March 14, 2014. His procedure was scheduled for March 17th. His return flight to Tehran was booked for March 28th. 11 days. The IRGC had arranged accommodation at a secure apartment building near the clinic, a location chosen for its multiple exits and defensible position. His bodyguards swept the apartment, checked sight lines from neighboring buildings, and established rotating surveillance schedules. By every standard protocol, the location was secure. What they did not know was that the apartment directly below Farid's had been rented 3 weeks earlier by a German businessman named Klaus Hoffmann. Klaus Hoffmann did not exist. The passport was forged. The business credentials were fabricated. The man occupying the apartment was a Mossad technical specialist whose expertise was gaining access to spaces without leaving evidence of entry. For 72 hours before Farid's arrival, the specialist worked. He mapped the building's infrastructure. He identified the electrical systems, water pipes, and ventilation pathways that connected the apartments. He installed monitoring equipment so sensitive it could detect heartbeats through concrete floors. And he prepared an access point, a carefully concealed passage through a shared utility space that would allow entry to Farid's apartment when the moment came. The procedure on March 17th went smoothly. Dr. Schell performed the catheter ablation as prescribed, with the single modification he had been paid to make. Farid recovered normally. His bodyguards reported nothing unusual. By March 21st, he was mobile again, walking carefully through Vienna's streets under heavy protection, a ghost briefly visible in a foreign city before returning to the shadows that kept him safe. March 23rd was a Sunday. Farid's bodyguards maintained their usual rotations. 2 remained in the apartment while 1 conducted perimeter checks. At 3:47 a.m., the building's electrical system experienced a brief fluctuation, lasting less than 4 seconds. The security cameras in the hallway recorded nothing unusual. The bodyguard on watch noticed only that his phone screen flickered momentarily. What he did not notice was the shadow that moved through the utility access point while the cameras were blind. The operative entered Farid's bedroom through a door that should have been locked but was not. The scientist was sleeping, his weakened heart working harder than it should have been after the procedure. What happened next took less than 90 seconds. A hand over the mouth, a needle into the neck. a compound that would trigger cardiac arrest within hours while leaving no detectable trace. The operative withdrew, secured the utility access, and vanished into Vienna's pre-dawn darkness. At 6:12 a.m., Farid's bodyguard attempted to wake him for morning prayers. The ghost who had built weapons for dictators was dead. His heart had simply stopped. The modified anesthetic had done its work, leaving a plausible medical explanation that would satisfy any investigation not specifically looking for assassination. Austrian authorities investigated for 6 days. The coroner found no evidence of foul play. The clinic reviewed its procedures and identified no irregularities. The IRGC quietly evacuated their personnel and made no public statements. Dr. Farid Nazari, who had never officially existed, left the world exactly as he had lived in it, without acknowledgement, without record, without proof that he had ever been real. But here is the part that no one expected. The story did not end with Farid's death. 3 weeks after the Vienna operation, an Iranian intelligence officer walked into the British embassy in Istanbul and requested asylum. He carried with him documentation of the ghost scientist's career, files that proved not only his existence but the full scope of his work across multiple weapons programs. The defector claimed he had grown disillusioned after learning of Farid's death. He believed the scientist had been betrayed from within, sold to Israel by someone inside the IRGC itself. The files he provided confirmed Mossad's suspicions about the weapons network. They also revealed something Mossad had not known. Farid had been working on a final project, one that had not yet been deployed. A biological agent designed to target specific genetic markers. A weapon that could theoretically discriminate between populations based on hereditary characteristics. The research was incomplete, but the implications were terrifying. Israeli analysts spent months reviewing the defectors' documents. What they found changed their understanding of the threat they faced. Farid's death had eliminated one scientist, but the knowledge he had created still existed, distributed across laboratories in Tehran, Damascus, and facilities that Western intelligence had not yet identified. The ghost was gone. His nightmares remained. This is the uncomfortable truth that Operation Saya revealed. Eliminating individuals does not eliminate ideas. The weapons Farid designed continue to be developed by scientists who inherited his notes. The networks he consulted for continue to operate. His death disrupted programs and delayed timelines, but it did not end them. The shadow he cast still falls across laboratories where other ghosts work in silence, building nightmares that may one day escape the facilities that contain them. The Iranian defector who walked into the British embassy was never seen publicly again. His documents were shared with Allied intelligence services, but never released to the public. The Austrian investigation into Farid's death remained closed. Dr. Martin Schell continued practicing medicine in Vienna until 2018, when he retired suddenly and relocated to South America. His current location is unknown. Within Mossad, Operation Saya is considered a qualified success. The primary objective was achieved. A high-value target was eliminated, without attribution or diplomatic consequences. The methods employed demonstrated capabilities that sent messages to other potential targets hiding in other countries. But senior analysts remain troubled by what they learned from the defectors' files. The weapon Farid was developing before his death represented a new category of threat, one that existing defenses were not designed to counter. The operation also raised questions that intelligence services prefer not to discuss publicly. How many other ghosts exist in laboratories around the world, scientists whose identities have been erased to protect the weapons they create? How many programs continue in darkness, known only to the regimes that sponsor them and the operatives who hunt them? The shadow Farid cast was unusual only in that it was eventually detected. Others remain invisible. And then there is the question that haunts those who study these operations professionally. The defector claimed Farid was betrayed from within. If true, it means someone inside Iran's security apparatus provided information that led to his death. Who was that person? What was their motivation? And are they still in place, still providing intelligence that shapes operations we have not yet learned about? The answers lie in classified files that will remain sealed for decades. What we know is only what has been pieced together from fragments, defector testimony, and the careful analysis of patterns that intelligence services leave behind, despite their efforts at invisibility. the complete truth may never emerge. This story is not just about one scientist or one assassination. It is about the invisible architecture of modern conflict, the wars fought in shadows by operatives whose names we will never know against targets whose existence is officially denied. It reveals a world where certain individuals are deemed too dangerous to live, where their elimination is authorized through bureaucratic processes that transform moral decisions into administrative paperwork. Farid Nazari was not innocent. The weapons he designed were intended to kill thousands, perhaps millions. The networks he built continue to threaten civilian populations across multiple countries. His elimination was, by any strategic calculus, justified by the harm he would have caused had he lived. But justification does not eliminate complexity. He was also a 19-year-old student who was given no real choice about the path his life would take. He was a son whose family buried an empty coffin. He was a human being who became a ghost because a government decided his talents were too valuable to waste on an ordinary existence. The operatives who killed him are equally complex. They are professionals who do difficult things in service of what they believe is a greater good. They operate under legal authorities granted by democratic governments. They follow rules of engagement designed to minimize collateral damage and avoid unnecessary suffering. But they also end lives through deception and violence, becoming executioners for states that prefer to keep their hands visibly clean. What Operation Saya ultimately reveals is uncomfortable for anyone who prefers simple narratives about good and evil. It shows that the invisible wars being fought across our world are conducted by people who are neither heroes nor villains, but instruments of national interests that operate beyond the boundaries of law and morality that govern ordinary life. The ghosts and the ghost hunters exist in a space where the rules we live by do not apply, where necessity justifies actions that would be crimes in any other context. Farid Nazari never officially existed. His death was never officially acknowledged. The operation that ended his life remains officially unconfirmed. But the weapons he created are real. The threats he helped build continue to evolve. And somewhere in the world right now, other shadows are working on nightmares that other operatives are hunting. The story continues. It always does. 7 years after Operation Saya, fragments of Farid's research appeared in a weapons facility discovered by UN inspectors in a location that remains classified. The molecular signatures matched his earlier work. The engineering principles bore his unmistakable methodology. Someone had continued his research. Someone had inherited his notes. The ghost had been eliminated, but his knowledge had already been distributed across networks that continued operating long after his death. This discovery forced intelligence analysts to confront an uncomfortable reality. In the age of digital communication and distributed research, eliminating individual scientists may slow weapons programs but cannot stop them. The expertise Farid possessed now exists in fragments across multiple laboratories, held by researchers who may not even know the full scope of what they are developing. Each piece seems innocuous. Together, they form blueprints for catastrophe. Mossad's response to this challenge remains classified, but satellite imagery suggests increased surveillance of facilities previously considered low priority. Communications intercepts indicate heightened interest in scientific personnel moving between certain countries. The hunt continues, not for one ghost, but for the network of shadows that inherited his work. The final irony of Operation Saya is this: the success that eliminated Farid Nazari also revealed the limitations of elimination as strategy. You can kill a man. You cannot kill an idea. You can silence a scientist. You cannot unlearn what he taught others. The weapons Farid designed continue their evolution in laboratories where other ghosts work in silence, building nightmares that may one day escape the facilities that contain them. Somewhere tonight, a young scientist is being recruited into a program that will erase their identity. Somewhere, an intelligence service is tracking patterns that suggest a new ghost has emerged. Somewhere, an operative is preparing for an operation that will remain classified for decades. The invisible war continues. It always has. It always will. The only question is whether we will learn about it before or after it shapes the world we live in. Drop your thoughts in the comments. If this investigation into invisible warfare made you think differently about what happens beyond the headlines, hit that like button and share this video. Subscribe because we are exposing the operations that governments deny and the machinery of power that operates in perpetual shadow. Hit the notification bell. The next buried operation is already unfolding somewhere, waiting to be revealed.